Hi, this is Matthew with RetroEdge.tech, and one of the goals of mine for in this series of videos that I've been doing with bspwm, and bspwm is Binary Space Partitioning Window Manager. bspwm is a tiling window manager, so it's different than a full desktop environment. So if you used Microsoft Windows, kind of know the whole thing of where you can move windows around. You've got a start menu, you've got a panel, a clock on the bottom, and very similar with Linux-based desktop environments as well. You've got GNOME 3, Cinnamon Desktop, which I've really liked and recommend to people getting into Linux for the first time. Linux Mint Cinnamon is a great place to try and start with. Cinnamon Desktop environment in the XFCE desktop environment or the KDE desktop environment. These are all desktop environments that usually have some kind of a start menu, status bar, ways to move around windows, and they usually are able to stack windows on top of each other so that windows can overlap each other. And what I've got up here, I've been using Manjaro here, so you can see my Manjaro desktop background. And I've been using Manjaro as kind of the base system where I record a lot of my videos, and I've been liking it. For well over 10 years, I used the Ubuntu version or distribution of Linux, and I really liked that too. I loved Ubuntu, and I still do. It's Linux, and there are so many things about Linux that are just the same over most versions of Linux. And I'm starting to get into Linux distributions that are different, and one of those is Alpine. And one of my goals has been to get a tiling window manager working in Alpine. Now, much earlier on, I actually did. I got the awesome window manager working in Alpine Linux. I was able to go through this guide on their wiki and was able to get it up and working. But at that point in time, I hadn't had much experience with tiling window managers. I didn't really know what I was doing. And it was my goal to get bspwm up and working in Alpine. I've got bspwm working in Manjaro and in Ubuntu-based distributions like Linux Mint. I've tested it I've done some other videos showing it being tested in Endeavour OS, which is an Arch-based version of Linux. I'm writing a script that assists in the initial installation and configuration of bspwm, because when I first started, I really couldn't figure out how to do anything. And so I'm providing some of these videos and writing this script that assists. It's called bspwm assist. And it's a shell script that installs bspwm and puts a default configuration in it. And my goal is to have that script working on most versions of Linux. And so far, I've got it working on Ubuntu-based Linux versions, Linux systems, and Arch-based Linux systems like Manjaro and Endeavour OS. Alpine Linux is quite different. Alpine Linux uses a different way to start the operating system. It uses OpenRC instead of systemd. It has no graphical user environment at all when you start out. It is just it's like a server. It is server Linux essentially. Alpine Linux is used mostly in Docker containers. That's by far its most how it gets used the most. In fact, I would say that very, very few people are using it directly on hardware, even for the server, and not very many people at all are using it with a graphical user interface, though it does have some information about how to set that up on their wiki, and they have a tiling window manager. I also did some reading up on the Arch wiki and found that even if I don't have my, let's see here, yeah, even if I don't have my xinitRC, which is how graphical applications start with X11 or X, which is the graphical way of handling graphics in Linux and Unix-based systems. even if I don't have the sxhkdrc set up correctly, I can just give it an argument and tell it which window manager to use. And so I'm going to do that and with bspwm, and it works, and I'll demonstrate that. So I have had success in setting up Alpine Linux with bspwm, and I will show you that now with a virtual machine. So I'll switch over to different desktop using a keyboard shortcut. And then I will click on this virtual machine here. And then we can full screen it here once it gets started. I hadn't closed this one all the way down. I had cloned it. Let's see if we can maybe hard shut it down. Give that a try. I may have to open my other one. Let's do that. Alpine Extended. This one I shut down. I could close this and see if it comes back up as well. Let's do that. Let's launch it here. GNOME boxes. See if restarting the application helps. Yes, it does. I just restarted boxes and up it goes. Never had that happen before, but of course, when you're recording a video and want to do a live showing, live demo, I guess boxes hung up on me there. So I just closed boxes, restarted it, and now I'm launching or loading up Alpine. I'll full screen it just so that we get the full effect here. I've got a login down here below. And one of the differences is that Alpine has you set up, essentially it has you install as root, and then you can add other users later, but you install as root. So I could log in right away as root. I guess I'll do that. I'll just I'll click in here to my virtual machine, type in root, type in my password, and now I'm logged in as root. So if I could say, who am I, will show me which user I'm logged in as. And you can see a little bit of information about what's going on and what's been set up and that sort of thing. I'm going to switch to the user that I've created. So I'm going to do su space Matthew. And because I've got root privileges, it'll just like log me in without even typing a password, though I, of course, do have a password for my Matthew user. Now, when I say, who am I? It gives me it says Matthew. So with bspwm, I am going for this minimal feel, and so I'm not bothered at all that it doesn't go to kind of a greeter window with a graphical interface that says, hey, here's the users that are on the system, or type your username and password and that sort of thing in this graphical form. It's usually called a greeter, or that's in a display manager. For this purposes, I don't care that that's not in there, but most of the Linux distributions that you download and install and test out or that you use are going to have some kind of greeter. When you turn on your computer, it'll go to a graphical interface or login screen, and then you can type your username and password, or choose your username and then type in your password, like say Windows does or Mac OS does. It'll show you the options for which users to log into. I'm okay with this being just text. And then, like I mentioned, I found the kind of shortcut to being able to get into the graphical environment and specify which window manager that graphical environment will use. So I type start X, which will start X, the graphical interface, usr/bin/bspwm. I press tab at the end there just to make sure that, hey, yes, I am actually typing the full path correctly and it auto-completed correctly. Press enter. We got some pretty colors on the screen, and there we go. We're launched in, and I had so I set up some things. I put pfetch in there. I installed a different terminal. I went with the XFCE4 terminal just because I knew that was in the repositories. I knew the XFCE stuff was easily available in Alpine. And it's pretty easy to configure, so I was able to right-click on the properties and set up some transparency and turn the menus off. There's the menu bar. It looks better in tiling window managers if that isn't there, and it's just the terminal. And so I've also set up shortcut keys so that I can press Control-Alt-T and bring up another terminal window, or I can press the Super Enter key to bring up a terminal. And I've done that with a couple things. So I've set up like moving windows around and the focus. I press this Super key and the left arrow, and it moves the focus to the different the windows. I can use the arrow keys to do that with the Super key and the arrow key. But I've also set it up so that I can do it with the Vim keys too, and I'll show you a little bit about that as well in the sxhkd. Which is the program that handles keyboard shortcuts. So Super, and then the Vim keys, so H for left and L for right, and I think J goes down, K goes up. So K is up, J is down. I'm still getting used to the Vim keys. So I've got them set up, but then I've also got the arrow keys set up so I can use both, just like I can use both Super Enter and Control-Alt-T to open a terminal. And then I've set my own keyboard combination for closing a window as well. And I might set it up so that I have DistroTubes, like most of his default shortcuts, set up in addition to mine, as long as there aren't any conflicts. And I think that'll make learning easier or more consistent for people who are newer or new to tiling window managers. So I have my own shortcut key that I like to close windows, which is just Alt space, and then that closes a window, closes another window. I can close all windows, and then I've just got a desktop background. There's nothing there. There's no bar, there's no clock, there's no status, no indicators of any kind. It's just a background, and then whatever windows I launch. And this background comes from DistroTubes. He has a whole, repository of desktop backgrounds that he's put on GitLab. And so I just downloaded them all, and I chose this one as, hey, this one looks fairly fitting for an Alpine Linux distribution. And then, of course, pfetch shows us that we are running Alpine Linux, and then I've enabled the Edge repository, so it's getting kind of all of the latest one and some of those things in testing. So that's more like a rolling release of Alpine, where if you don't enable that, you have like a particular release that you're on. I think the latest one is the 3.11, I believe is perhaps the latest one. We can pull up the Firefox browser here in just a minute and look at some of the things with Alpine Linux. But yes, I am running Alpine Linux. I am running the binary space partitioning window manager, bspwm, tiling window manager in it. And you can see that it is super lightweight. Now there's a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't work yet. I've just got it working, but it barely takes any memory. I've only got 2 gigs of memory allocated to this virtual machine, and launching it with the background and the terminal and some, be playing around here, it's still only using 134 megs of memory. That's it. Which, of course, that doesn't matter a whole lot, but I'm retroedge.tech. I'm interested in running operating systems on older or more limited hardware, and including hardware with 32-bit processors instead of 64-bit processors. And Alpine Linux supports that. So one of my shortcut keys is to open Firefox. I did the Super F, which will open Firefox here. And I'll just restore my session because I set it down before. And yeah, like I had mentioned, the wallpaper that I've got here, oops, it's still struggling there with the restore session. There might be some graphical things to work out here as well. But anyway, this desktop background came from the Derek Taylor's wallpapers thing. So yeah, let's open up another terminal, and that kind of fixes the windowing thing. There you go. Yeah. So another glitch for when I'm doing my video. That didn't happen before when I was testing it. But yeah, a little bit of a windowing glitch there. But if I bring up another terminal, I can see that that window kind of resizes the way I would expect it to. And so with Alpine Linux, let's just scroll down here. I guess we can close that one. Latest release is Alpine 3.11.3. And so, but I've enabled the Edge repository, so I think that puts me at kind of the latest testing stuff, like a rolling release, like Arch or Manjaro would be, or close to that. But Alpine is significantly different in how it handles a lot of stuff. And one of the reasons I'm interested in using it is because of how many architectures it supports. And so with using older hardware or just different and fun hardware, most of the time the stuff that I do is with standard PCs. I really like working with PCs with the Core 2 Duo processors, which most of that kind of end run was 64-bit processors. So the same version that you would download for a brand new computer today will work on those Core 2 Duo 64-bit processors. But some of the LGA 775 processors, which are what the Core 2 Duo is part of, some of the earlier ones in that socket were 32-bit processors, and I want to experiment with those. And there'll be some older computers that I'll just want to play around with and experiment with. And a lot of those will have 32-bit processors. Or I've got a Raspberry Pi or some other ARM-based stuff that I might want to mess with. And the neat thing about Alpine is it essentially has versions for about any hardware that you could think of. And for me, with running on regular computers, this extended one, so most commonly used packages included, suitable for routers and servers. It says runs from RAM. I've chosen to install it, so it's persistent. And I'm currently running the 64-bit version, but then there's also the x86 version, which I have tested on some 32-bit hardware, and it boots up and works great. And then it's got another number of other different options there. Some that are specially designed for virtual machines, or Zen, which is like a hypervisor. They've got some that are specifically designed for the Raspberry Pi, and I've tested that as well. I have a Raspberry Pi 1, and my son and I loaded that up on the Raspberry Pi 1. And that was fun to play around with because it was Linux that was extremely fast and snappy, even on pretty limited hardware. And the Raspberry Pis are 32-bit as well. So 32-bit ARM, and there's builds that work great of Alpine Linux that work great on Raspberry Pi. Then they've also got generic ARM. So if you've got another ARM device with an ARM-based processor, it's very likely that Alpine Linux will work on that as well. The Post-Market OS, which is a project that's designed to have a full Linux working on mobile phones, that is based on Alpine Linux. So Post-Market OS is based on Alpine Linux. And I haven't messed at all with that. I haven't experimented at all with Post-Market OS. I just know about it. I think it's cool that it's based on Alpine. The main things, the keyboard shortcuts, being able to move around from desktop to desktop, being able to switch, the focus between the windows, being able to switch the windows like so, being able to open additional windows. I've gotten used to that workflow. I'm liking it, and it's super fast in this Alpine Linux. I wanted to show you a little bit of the package management as well. The package management is just extremely fast. If I type, another thing I wanted to show is that Control L will do essentially the same thing as clear. So if I want to clear out and say, hey, here's, I don't want the whatever I had typed before or whatever was showing up on the screen, instead of typing out clear and then pressing enter, I can just press Control L and that does the same thing. So defetch, boom, there we go. Control L would clear it. So let's take a look at the package manager. So something to note is that only root can install. And since I'm logged in as a regular user, I do not have any root privileges, and sudo is not on the machine. So if I type which sudo, it's not there. It's so what you're used to with, say, Manjaro or Ubuntu of typing sudo apt install or sudo do this. That's not built into the way Alpine works out of the box. You can install it. You can install sudo and configure it. There's another option called do as, which you can install and configure as well. But out of the box, those are not set up with the default install of Alpine Linux. So I can type su, which will give me super user privileges, and then I can type the root password. And now when I type who am I, it'll say that I'm root. So there was a file manager, so a graphical file manager, not a terminal-based file manager, but a graphical file manager, similar to what, say, Windows Explorer would be on a Windows PC, or Nautilus would be on Ubuntu, or GNOME, or Nemo for Cinnamon, or Thunar for XFCE. There's one called PCmanFM, which is a very lightweight graphical file manager, and I played around with that a little bit on the LXQT or LXQt desktop. They have a PCmanFM -QT that is essentially a port of that particular file manager ported to the Qt graphical framework. But Brody Robertson did a review of the SpaceFM file manager, and I thought that was pretty cool. So let's install it here on Alpine. So first, let's do a search, and I'll show you how to do that. So the package manager, instead of apt, which would be or apt on Ubuntu, or Pacman for Arch-based systems like Manjaro or Endeavour OS, in Alpine, it's APK. So I assume that stands for Alpine Package Manager or something like that. So APK. And then I can search for stuff that I want. So I can type search. And then I want to search for SpaceFM is the package that I'm interested in. And then it gives me some results. From the research that I've done, this one here, if I just typed in SpaceFM, it would give me a much more minimal one. It looks quite old school, completely functional, but definitely a different style than the one that has the GTK3. And I want that a little bit extra visual stuff and the icons and things that go with it that are with the GTK3 windowing toolkit stuff. So we'll install that one instead. To use the package manager in Alpine to install, I do apk add. So instead of the keyword install that you might use in Ubuntu, it's add, and then to remove a package, it's del for delete. So I'll do apk add space fm-gtk3. And this is one of the things that really hooks me with Alpine, is just how fast the package manager installs things. I saw this on one of DJ Ware's videos. He's Crux work on both YouTube and library. One of DJ Ware's videos, he was showing how fast the package manager was and explained a little bit of how it worked. But I'll press enter here, and it's going to grab that stuff. It's installing, and it is done. It's boom, it's there, and it's pretty fast. And for lighter weight programs, it's almost instantaneous. So this had to pull down, some graphical resources and some whole bunch of extra libraries and that sort of thing. And it still did it really quickly in a virtual machine. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. Because I've kind of I think I've installed the packages to launch. See, yep, I installed Rofi there. So let's run SpaceFM, and there we go. It's launched this one here. Let's put that on a different desktop, so I can do Super Shift and then put it on a different desktop. So what that's done is that's taken it from the current workspace or desktop and put it on a different one, and then I can use my keycode shortcuts, and now I'm seeing just that. And if I open another window like a terminal here, then it'll tile it there, and it automatically tiles. The way the tiling window manager works, just kind of like puts the tiles up. And I'm going to kind of leave that at the default. I'm not trying to do advanced control of where the windows are and tell it exactly where to go. I'm just going to open something, and boom, there it is in a tile. And if I want to move it around, I can move around. If I want to close it, I can close it. And that's kind of how I'm working with the tiling window manager now. It's very minimalistic, not very complicated, no bar, no dock, no status, just the windows that I'm working with. And so I think that SpaceFM is named SpaceFM File Manager because it has this concept of spaces here. And let's see if I can grab that and move it there. Okay. And so a lot of applications have tiling too, essentially, just like when I open up a new window here and I've got a tile here and a tile here. A lot of applications that you're familiar with and used to using also have tiles, so to speak. A lot of web applications, say webmail, for example, will have a side pane and a place for your messages, and then a place to read the message. Email clients are especially like that. I use Thunderbird, and it has these panes where there's this part of the window that does this particular thing, this view, and this part of the window that does this part of the thing. And the SpaceFM essentially has sort of spaces within them with these little toggle things that you can turn on and off, and it looks like it's got 4 of them there. For me, it kind of makes sense to have 2, and then I can and then it's independent, so I could type the path of exactly where I wanted to go. And so on this left-hand pane, let's say I go to pictures and wallpaper. And you can see I've got 2 wallpapers in there. That's the one that I have set right now, and that I got from DistroTube's repository. And this is another one that I just downloaded and grabbed from a search that I thought looked sort of like Alpine. So I downloaded that as well, stuck them in a wallpapers folder. So on this left-hand pane, I've got this, and then you see on this right-hand pane, I've got essentially a different view. And if I wanted to copy and paste, it's kind of like having 2 windows open, but they're within the same window. And there's a lot of powerful things that you can do with that. It's very similar to, say, Midnight Commander, which has 2 panes and different ways of copying things back and forth, also based on the file manager called Norton Commander, which has this concept of 2 spaces that you can see where they are and copy things back and forth and work with the different files and that sort of thing. And you can have 2 views of that. I haven't really played with it much, just to say that, hey, here it is. It can be installed in Alpine. I kind of like the basic idea. I'm not sure that if PCmanFM may work just fine for me as well, though I know that they've ported most of their current developments to the Qt version of the windowing stuff, where this is GTK, the GTK3. And then, of course, if I just turn the space off like that, then it just kind of works as a regular file explorer, file manager. So just wanted to show you that, and to close it, press my shortcut key and move back to my regular screen. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I thought it would be a lot harder to get everything set up with Alpine Linux. But with I want to show you how to edit the shortcut keys, because right now, if I would press the shortcut key for Explorer, I don't think it'll do anything. So press the shortcut key that I've got set up, and nope, nothing happened. And that's because when I had originally set it up, I had hard-coded that for Nemo, which is the file manager in Cinnamon that doesn't exist in this version of Linux. So when I press that shortcut key and the hotkey daemon tries to launch that command, it's like, nope, nothing happens. So I believe that Vim is installed. Which Vim? Yes, Vim is installed. So let's go to vim.config sxhkd, and then the sxhkdrc is the configuration file, and then we can go through. And so I've edited this I've installed the xfce4 terminal instead of the GNOME terminal that I had by default. And then each of these are the key combinations in which can do different things. So, I've got my close window as alt space. If I want to quit bspwm, that's how I do it with the Super Shift Q. Moving around, so down here I've got the Rofi launcher, which I use a little bit, and then here's what I wanted to change, the file explorer. So in Vim, so I'll press CW to change the word, and let's type SpaceFM, escape, get out of insert mode, :WQ. Let's try reloading it. I have a shortcut key for reloading the sxhkd program. So I'm going to press that shortcut key. And now when I press Super E, it should open. Yes, and it did. It opened the file manager. And I can full screen it. I can put it on a different workspace like so. And let's close again. Windows E opens up a file explorer. And Windows E is the same shortcut in Windows. And since my work as a computer repairman and I sell refurbished computers as well, I'm working with Windows all the time. So the Windows keyboard shortcuts are something that I use all the time to get things done quickly in Windows. And when I'm using Linux, tiling window managers are kind of nice because I can set the keyboard shortcuts to ones that make sense for me or ones that I'm used to because, hey, I work in Windows all the time. For the work that I do, I can take some of those same keyboard shortcuts when they make sense. I don't want to just copy Windows just because they did it. But in this case, having, to go to the file explorer, have that the same key as Windows, the Windows E key or Super E key, makes sense in this case. So that's how I edited that. So the configuration file for controlling your hotkeys is there. In order for bspwm to work, that's got to be there. And then the other thing that needs to be there, so if I change directory into the config, I press Control L, I can clear that out so you can see a little bit more. And I'll just clear that out to get rid of some clutter. There we go. But if I change, I am in the config directory there. If I do ls, you can see there's a couple of these. So I installed NeoFetch. SpaceFM now has a configuration. XFCE has a configuration folder that has settings that I set in the terminal. That saves them in a text file there. And then the sxhkd, you saw me edit that file. And that changed the behavior. The other file that's super important, and it will not work unless it is the folder bspwm. And if we go into that one, and then if we lsla, you'll see that this file here is executable. And I made it so that it's executable only by my user. So that has to be executable. And if we take a look at that file, so let's just do less bspwmrc, we can see that I am writing, essentially, it's just a shell script. And I chose bspwm because I want to get better at shell scripting. And the configuration file for bspwm is just a shell script. It's got the shebang line for a shell script there at the top. And then you just write commands directly into it. So Compton is the compositor that's in there. Then I start the sxhkd program that handles my hotkeys. This right here is the command that sets my screen resolution to a 16:9 ratio. On my default desktop, I have the 1920x1080. That's the same ratio. And then I have a program that I can run that has an option to set the background wallpaper. And I've just written that line directly in the bspwmrc file, configuration file, but that's an executable bash script. And then everything else that's in here is essentially, and I've even written some if-thens in here down here at the bottom, so that if a particular directory exists, so it determines, hey, if it's in Linux Mint, so this was from my scripting that I had done and I was experimenting, and if I boot into that, then if it sees that backgrounds folder exists, it's labeled Linux Mint, then I'll use the program to set that particular file as the desktop background. And same thing, I put another if statement in there. So I was experimenting with just, hey, shell scripting, being able to write things directly in the POSIX shell or bash commands and have them run immediately. So that's one of the reasons why I chose bspwm, is because I wanted to get better at shell scripting. And I definitely have. As a result of learning about these things, my Linux knowledge is expanded so much in the past couple months as a part of taking on this challenge. And I definitely have gotten better at shell scripting. I hope to get a lot better than I am now, but I certainly have gotten better than when I started getting into this about 2 months ago. So, show and tell. I've got bspwm tiling window manager running in Alpine Linux. There's a whole lot more to do, and the script that I'm writing, I might have to write a separate one. Well, I could probably incorporate it in, but there's probably some caveats with setting, or a lot of extra steps with setting up bspwm in Alpine, primarily because it doesn't have sudo, and I'll have to figure out a way to approach including the same type of things within the script, with kind of separating now, well, it's got to be set up for a particular user, but with Alpine, all this stuff has to be installed as root. So there'll probably be a way to check and say, hey, here's the other users that are installed in this system besides root. Which one of those do you want to use? Kind of using some logic to pull that up. Or the only user that you've got installed is root, and then maybe have my script could prompt to create another user that then the script would then install the configuration files for bspwm. So Alpine is a little bit of a different kind of Linux version than the other Linuxes that I'm used to. A lot of the same basic stuff applies, but it's definitely different enough that it's challenging and a whole lot of fun as well. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.